call a web board meeting to order. And first off, I'd like to see if we're all here. So if you don't mind, I'll do a quick attendance run. So Bob Stewart, I saw that you were here. Hi.
Hello?
Enrique. Yes.
Here.
Enrique's here. Susan Ricky Smith.
Here.
Susan Miller. Okay, we'll come back. Bonnie. I see you're here.
Hi.
Bill? Not yet. Michelle? Oh, Bill is here. I see Bill. Okay, Michelle? I don't see Michelle yet. Jeff?
For some reason, my ear jacks aren't working. I don't know why.
Okay, so not Jeff yet. JJ's here and I'm here. I do.
Just wondering if I broke my computer.
I don't think you have.
Tom's here.
Oh, great. Okay, so I think, and Tom's here. I think that we definitely have a quorum, so let's proceed, shall we? So if you could review the minutes from March 1st, and at the appropriate time, I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, so Tom has moved to accept the minutes as written. Do I have a second?
I'll second. I'll second, Bonnie.
Okay, Bonnie seconded. All in favor of accepting the minutes as written, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay. Well, if you don't mind, if we could look at the agenda real quickly. This is our big day. This is what the other months have led up to, making some decisions on the renewals for next year. And for that reason, we have the CIO update up front because for those of you who have just joined the board, CIO is one of our subcommittees that handles a lot of details and then makes recommendations to the whole board so that the board meeting itself can be limited to 4 hours maximum, so, or 3.5. Tom's going to go first with that update. Before we get there, if we do make final decisions on everything today, then we will not need to have the second April board meeting. I think that's entirely possible today. Also, you'll see as the presentations go through by Willis Towers Watson that they've streamlined the process so that it's really clear on the things we need to make decisions over. So once again, I think Willis Towers Watson has done a phenomenal job of presenting, making the presentations really easy for us to follow. And then finally, this will be Jenny Mark's last meeting with us, and I just want to take just a small amount of time just to thank her for everything she's done. She's been here well before I started on OEB, and she's made it really, she has given me time and understanding and helped with any questions I had, and I'm grateful for that. I think, as importantly, Jenny's presentations over the years have been so clear and concise that it makes our jobs easier. And I sincerely hope that when Mercer becomes our consultant, that they'll be able to meet the high bar that Jenny has set. Okay, with that said, Tom, how would you like to proceed?
I would.
Okay.
I'm going to go through 4 decision points that we as a group need to make. Rose, if you could go to page 9 on the Moda behavioral health proposal. Okay, one more. Okay, one too many. Page 9. Yeah. Okay. So this is the proposal that Moda has come up with in how they want to change how they are dealing with behavioral health. And you had a presentation, I believe, last week on this. And this slide summarizes what the features are of the program. The goal is to increase access, improve outcomes reporting. There's essentially no outcomes reporting now, and align with coordinated care initiatives and goals. Essentially move to a value-based purchasing methodology. So their coordinated care model for behavioral health has 5 components. They have behavioral health champions that are going to be the navigators who will help members land in the most appropriate spot. They're looking at increasing access by using third-party networks. They're looking at having an online portal for appointment scheduling, finding support, outcomes management through standardized questionnaires, screening tools, outcome management system, and then a value-based payment system. We discussed this at CIAO. The first question was, is this, compared to where we are now, is this the direction that we think OEB should go? And our answer was yes. The second question was, when should this happen? All of these elements are not in place yet, but Moda is actively working on it. The rationale behind our agreement was, one, it increased access. We thought it actually improved access to diverse therapists and would help us in our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we thought that actually measuring outcomes was critical because the only way to control utilization in a setting where there's more and more people who are needing help is by using outcomes measurement that tell you when you've got to where you want to be. PEB is looking, this behavioral health has actually been part of the integration work group effort, and and PEB is not here yet in regards to what is being proposed. We clarified to make sure that it was not, our effort was not contingent on what PEBs were. Now, if you can go to the 12th slide, page 12 on this one. And this is the costs. There are costs to have these, to have this behavioral health champions / navigators. And there are obviously costs associated with having third-party vendor networks. However, the agreement that Moda has with us is that they will essentially just subtract the administrative costs from claims. In other words, this will be at no impact for 2 years to the to our rates while we get this program up and going. So the recommendation from the CIAO to the board is to approve the Moda's behavioral health program and to have it become part of the 22-23 plan renewal, acknowledging that while the majority of the program will be in place 22-20 at the beginning of the plan year, several other elements will be added. And finally, that we'll have a subgroup of CIAO that will meet with Moda and consultants over the summer to make sure that things are moving forward in a positive manner. So with that, Robert, I we need to make a decision about whether or not to move forward. I would entertain questions from board members. I'm sure our Moda people would entertain questions, as would our consultants.
Oh, yes, it's, I think it'd be appropriate to break these down.
Yeah, one at a time.
As we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So any questions regarding Moda's plan or proposed program for mental health?
There was a unanimous, the CIAL members had unanimously supported what I just outlined.
And I'll say from my end, no risk in order to, test out a new program and see how it goes, and the improvements will meet those needs of the increased usage we're seeing and the increased need. So if there's
I'll
no
get it started. I'll move that we accept
hold on,
proposal.
Tom. I have a hand up by Enrique.
Great.
Enrique, you're muted, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Tom. I guess my only question is that I see on the projected annual cost for the OEB, I see there's claims cost for service plus monthly access fee per participant. I guess my question is, are participants going to be additionally charged because of this sort of service? And if so, what's the average cost?
There is
cost on that?
There is a cost to the program. It's essentially an administrative fee that the vendor network charges the plan. In this situation, Moda. While it is a per participant fee, it is not. There's no charge to the individual member. They would just be covered by their own health plan, whatever their benefit structure is.
Well, thank you, Tom. That makes me feel a lot better. I hate to see our fellow
good question
users getting a surprise cost. So appreciate that.
Yeah, good question.
And otherwise, it would be in our renewal votes as well, if it represented an increase of cost for next year. Okay. So Tom, I think
I was just going to move to approve Moda's behavioral health plan, and with a 21-22 plan year start.
So moved.
You mean 22-23?
22-23. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure the motion is accurate. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
This is
JJ. Okay, we have a second from JJ. All in favor of authorizing Moda to start with this new program starting in 22-23, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Do I have any nays? Okay. That motion is passed unanimously. Okay, Tom.
The next one had to do with the diabetes prevention program, and I would have you go to page 7, Rose, if you could. This one, while the first one there was unanimity, we struggled a little bit with the recommendations on this one. The recommendation first, this is the best-in-class features of the diabetes prevention. What a diabetes prevention program would have in place. There's CDC recognition that if you go down one more slide, it will show the elements of those of that certification. Kaiser Permanente has health education that includes pre-diabetes efforts to reverse that condition. Moda is proposing the development of their own. Both of the programs have third-party vendors that are CDC certified and are providing this service for PEB members now. And so if you can go to page 11, it shows what our options are. The options include for Moda, authorizing them to work on their own pre-D program. Option number 2 is for them to essentially refer all of this work to Livongo. Now, Moda already has a relationship with Livongo for their actual people with type 2 diabetes and for management of that. So they already have a relationship, but they don't have the relationship for the pre-D work. I guess they do for their PEB members. Kaiser Permanente's option is to essentially keep with what they have now, which is not CDC certified. And when you look at all of the elements, there's several gaps, and particularly around monitoring and reporting capacity. And the second option is for them to refer these people to their third-party vendor, Moda, which again they already have in place with because of their relationship with PEB. Our consultants recommended that we go with Moda option 2 and Kaiser option 2 as outlined. If halfway down, you'll see what the costs are per participant, and below that there's the estimated annual costs. Now, the annual costs are much higher for the first year of this, and that's because of there being essentially a backlog of people, and that then you just add the new people that are, that would qualify for this program. So that's explains some of the jump in that first year. We asked the plans what they would want to do. Kaiser Permanente, again, is happy with what they're doing in regards to their health education, but believes the Omada product is additive, meaning that it gives some people an additional way to address the issue of their metabolic syndrome and their pre-diabetes state. Moda, however, while they're okay with going the direction of Livongo, was very much more interested in being able to develop their own program. They think that they'll have greater engagement, they'll have greater connection with their membership and be able to do more. Now, the problem is that it's a program that's in the middle of development, so we can't compare the outcomes that Livongo has with what Moda's program would be, because the Moda program is in development. So it requires, in a way, a leap of faith to be able to recommend that we support Moda's pre-D program. The committee leaned towards authorizing and funding Moda's pre-D program because we thought that it allowed, it would be closer to the members, and there'd be a greater chance with engagement and subsequent participation. There were some features of the program also that were a little bit more, more substantial than what the Livongo program offered. So this, while the first one was, no question, this one was kind of a lean towards the having Moda develop their pre-D program, and Kaiser Permanente doing what they thought was fine, which was continuing with their health education program as that's in place, and then adding on the Moda product. Each of these the recommendation also is to fund these through the use of the reserve stabilization. I'm sorry, yeah, the RSR funds for the 2-year period of time, where we'd be able to actually then go and look at engagement and outcomes and be able to make a longer term decision. I think that's as far as I want to go with that one. So the recommendation would be to go with option 1 for Moda and option 2 for Kaiser Permanente.
So, Tom, can I just
Please
clarify a couple of things? Okay, so the way that we're proposing this, or on any of these 4 options, if you will, that there's no premium impact for 22-23. Is that correct?
There is no premium impact for, and also for the subsequent year. The funds would come out of our reserve fund.
Okay. The reason I bring that up, if there's no impact on next year, then I think it's appropriate to vote on it here. If there were a premium impact, I would delay that until.
Got it. No, there is no. It does not change. It does not change any of the numbers for rates.
Okay. Are there any questions on any of the 2 programs for both plans before we end up making a decision?
I will move to approve for the diabetes prevention program that we adopt Moda option 1 and Kaiser Permanente option 2.
So moved.
We have a motion. Oh, was that Enrique? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of choosing Moda option 1 and Kaiser option 2 as they exist on the screen before you, signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays? Okay, that motion is passed as well. Okay, Tom.
So now we're on better choices, better health. And Rose, if we could go to page 3. I missed the March board meeting, and I know that there was conversation about this program then. Page 3 that Rose is getting us to shows the features of yeah, okay. So this shows the what the program is. It's an internet-based group workshop dealing with chronic disease self-management skills. It's not related to a specific disease. It's the topics you can see written down. The idea is to help with frustration, fatigue, pain, isolation, ways to maintain and improve strength, exercise, managing medications. You can see on the right that we have seen substantial, first there's been a gradual decrease in registration. Along with that, a significant drop in terms of people showing up, and then completion rates continue to drop. So essentially you can see those numbers. Now, if you look at the costs to OEBB for this, and this has been funded out of our wellness fund, which is part of our administrative fees, you can see the cost decreasing. And the reason why it's been decreasing, initially we were paying for registrations, then we were paying for only for people who actually showed up to the first visit, and then the last 2 years we've paid only for people who, there's been an addition, a set of the fees going to people who completed 4 out of the 6 sessions. We asked, and then if you go to the next slide, Rose. We asked our plan partners what they thought. Both of them agreed with the consultant's recommendation, which was to discontinue participation, and Kaiser Permanente added in that they had alternatives in place for their members that essentially dealt with the same issue. We did have public comment on this topic. It's at the end of your board packet, and it was from an individual who had participated twice in the program, found it valuable each time, and hoped to be able to do it again. That was one person writing a comment. The CL members were unanimous in their agreement with consultants and the plans that we discontinue Better Choices, Better Health at the end of this plan year. And you can these just show the considerations and recommendation is to sunset the Canary Health Better Choices, Better Health program. So that's it for this one, Robert.
Okay, so any questions or comments on the recommendation to sunset the Better Choices, Better Health program? Michelle.
Hi, I just was wondering if this program helps people navigate insurance, because I don't see anything about that in the description. And that seems like one of the major sources of frustration if you have a chronic condition.
My understanding, it does not do that.
Jenny, is that your understanding too, or anybody at Willis Towers Watson?
Yeah, that's correct. Our understanding
Yeah,
is
that's
that
correct. Yeah, this is Matt. I just want to chime in. Yeah, it's not a navigation tool for benefits. So it's an internet-based peer-led support group where they walk you through these different workshops in sort of what Tom described before, helping you with the different topics, but there is no benefit. They don't connect any of the additional benefits or resources that OEB members have.
This is JJ. I know we talked about this last time, and I kind of have the same thought. It wasn't an issue with cost. It wasn't even an issue with the efficacy of the program. It was more of a scope of reach and return on investment. So based upon that, I move that we affirm our previous decision and sunset the program.
Second.
Okay, Jeff seconded. All those in favor of sunsetting the Better Choices, Better Health program, starting with the 22-23 plan year, signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays? Okay, that motion is also passed.
Okay, so the last of the decision points for the board has to do with our wellness program, looking at both WW, also known as Weight Watchers, and the WebMD1. We'll start with the WebMD1. This is the evolution of Healthy Teens, Healthy You. There's been, this is the WebMD is the third owner of this product, and it has changed significantly over time. You can see as outlined here what the platform involves. I would have you look at, it is a web-based system. I think the critical issues have to do with about 2/3 of the way down, you'll see something called a dedicated program coordinator, and 2 below that, you'll see developing and managing wellness champions network. About 3 years ago, we went through a pretty exhaustive review of our wellness programs, and we thought they fell into 2 categories. One was things that we would offer to every OEB member kind of direct from OEB, and the other was sponsoring and encouraging local wellness activities, and with that, really encouraging the development of wellness champions in school districts and other entities at the local level. And so I think one of the major activities of this program coordinator is to help, again, develop and manage the wellness champions. And the WebMD1 becomes the platform that these wellness champions can use. There's a tremendous number of options in terms of challenges and educational resources and apps and device integration and reporting. And the issue, if you look, you'll see that there hasn't been a great enrollment so far. It only went live as of November 1st, 2021. And we've just dealt with the last Omicron surge. And so COVID is still, I think, impacting this. The consultants and CIAL thought that there was significant potential here. We're not paying on the basis of participation, however. We're paying on essentially a per employee per month basis. And our recommendation is that we include the WebMD1 into our 22-23 plan year and very closely monitor and see how this developmental effort bears fruit. Obviously, we want to support the local activities, and we think that this type of a platform is critical for us to be able to, for them to be successful. So our recommendation is that we approve this for the next plan year with lots of close follow-up and monitoring. Any other comments from the CIAL members? There was unanimous agreement with that recommendation. Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions or comments on either WebMD or WW?
Okay, and WW is, I'm sorry, WW, if Rose, you can go to the next slide. This is the one that is truly the no-brainer. We have significant participation. Over 7,000 of our members are engaged with us. WW is doing a better and better job of coming up with some outcomes information. And you can see here the number was 7,755. There are some additional recommendations in terms of Curbo. For those who are new to the board, is the weight management program for adolescents. And you can see under recommendations that we continue to work with WW in regards to outcomes management and ways to really understand engagement to even a greater degree. But this one, the price has been relatively set now. It's been stable over the last 3 to 4 years. And again, very significant participation.
Can I just add a comment?
Jeff, yeah.
Yes.
That we've been working with WW for quite some time now. Glenn has been our lead interactor with them. And they have responded by making incremental changes that we've asked for. So I, for one, value the relationship we have with them and just want to make that comment of support.
Great. I agree 100%. So the recommendation from CIAO is that we approve both WebMD1 and WW as outlined in our 22-23 plan year. These are funded not through the rate process, but through OEB's administrative fees. And they essentially are no change to what we have been paying over the past 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so Glenn, I see your hand was up.
Yeah, just to clarify, WebMD is funded through our administrative fee. Weight Watchers is funded through the premiums.
But I thought it was, I know there's a pass through the premiums, but well, you know better than I can.
This is Ollie. It's kind of semantics. They're both really through the premium, but one's part of the admin fee and the other's just a part of the premium. But they're both part of the premium.
Okay.
But it's safe to say that neither one of these programs is contributing to an increase in the rates that we're going to discuss.
No, these are all
right?
these are stable numbers.
Okay. All right, and because of that, I will entertain a motion for these two programs now instead of later.
This is JJ. Move to approve both programs.
Oh, is there somebody else who raised their hand? I'm sorry, I just missed that. So
Michelle.
Speak up. Michelle, go. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I don't want to derail the process, and it sounds like this is going to get approved. I just want to say that I think it's extremely troubling that there is a weight loss app for children as part of this. So if there's an opportunity to talk about that, the potential harm of that, which I think can be pretty, has been pretty well documented, that would be something to maybe to put on agenda for future meetings if that's possible.
We could also have them chat with you there, Michelle. We had a fairly lengthy discussion about that. I don't remember if it was 2 years ago, because we had initial similar concerns initially, and then we had a substantive series of meetings about that to address those concerns.
And I didn't say weight loss program. It's a weight management program, but just as JJ said, this was one that we spent hours discussing, and actually, Rose may be able to find you the video of the conversation, and if it's still an issue, we can for sure go back to the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, so I have a motion to approve both programs. There's been no second yet, though.
This is Bonnie. I'll second.
Okay, Bonnie seconds. Okay, so all those in favor of continuing with WebMD and WW signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, that motion is also passed. Tom, is there anything else?
Yes, we spent an hour reviewing our pharmacy plans or the results of the annual pharmacy result. There are ongoing pressures with more and more exotic and expensive medications taking care of people with unusual diseases. For Moda, specialty drugs now represent about 60% of the spend, and they care for 1% to 2% of their population. The pressures for these things will just continue to increase over time. I'm not going to get into it would, to talk anything more would require another 10 to 15 minutes, and you don't need data now. We have to get on to the rate setting process. But I would recommend that you spend, that board members spend time going through the deck that was sent out to CL for the annual pharmacy report. It's just interesting to see what the pressures are for our plans to try to keep at a 3.4 when these incredibly expensive medications continue to be developed and used. You're muted, Robert.
I almost got their meeting. Any questions or comments on the pharmacy information that Tom just discussed? And it's definitely more detail in the CL packet if you're interested. Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Tom. Well done and right on time.
Yay.
You cranked it out.
That was the goal.
Yep. All right, so we're moving on to everybody's favorite subject of the year, renewal decisions. And so I'm going to pass this off to Jenny and Brett.
Well, let's see, while Rose is getting that put up, I'll just start off by saying thank you so much for the very complimentary words at the beginning of the meeting. It sure has been an honor and a pleasure to work with OEB over the past 8, almost 9 years. So it's been a learning and fun experience for me, and I just am happy to have helped contribute to such a great program. So thank you for the opportunity. Okay, well, as you said, Robert, we have quite a bit to talk about today, but would start off by saying that we have a really great renewal position to start with, and so I think you'll have plenty of time for discussion, but I think we'll have some great decisions to make for members today. I will start. So we'll start off by talking about the goals of our renewal season for the year. And considerations for this upcoming renewal cycle. At this meeting, we will review with you the final renewal positions from all of the medical, dental, vision carriers, and we'll make some decisions about the final renewal positions as well as any optional benefit changes. And we will help provide information so that you can make a decision about those optional benefit changes today. I am planning to go through the employee assistance program, but I am reading through the minutes. It looked like this was approved at the last meeting, so we can talk about that when we get to the employee assistance program. And then on the life and disability, we reviewed the renewals for life and disability at the February renewal and largely got some direction from the board, but there's one final. Well, we formally need to vote on all of those options, and then there's one final decision to be made about the optional spouse life today. So that's what we're going to go. That's what we're going to go through today. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so it's always good to just be reminded about what are our renewal goals and objectives for this particular year. And so the board reviewed this at the beginning of our renewal work back in November of last year, but and they're largely similar to prior years. We make some slight changes each year, but I'll just review them real quickly. So ensuring sustainable and appropriate rates for each one of the plan offerings is a goal. And we did say that we would review rate relativity every 3 years, which we'll talk more about. We want to ensure that members have a meaningful choice and array of plan designs from which to select. The board will consider plan design or program changes that improve the efficiency of the program or further goals that OEB or OHA has set out, which include advancing coordinated care models, value-based payment models, and then other initiatives that are explored in the innovation work group. Of course, there is a legislative requirement for OEB to meet, and that's the 3.4% growth cap on expenditures. And And then, of course, there's often other legislative requirements that we need to include, like federal or state mandates. And then newer in the last years, last renewal or so, we've begun to incorporate some health equity considerations into the decision-making process. So with that as our backdrop, let's go ahead and get started on our renewal discussion. As a bit of background, the board has requested go ahead and go to that next slide, Rose, slide 5. Some historical review of all of the different renewals that we've had, that OEB has had by carrier and by line of coverage. So we've put this table together here for you to give you an idea about what the renewals have been over the last 5 years. On the far right, you can see what the average is for each carrier. So I think the good news in this table is that the renewals really have been pretty favorable from year to year. So this is just a good piece of information to have in your back pocket as you consider the renewals that we're considering for the upcoming year. Okay, I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brad. Looks like he's on.
All right, thank you, Jenny. Normally, the actuary talks about the tables that have the most numbers, but Jenny already did all that. So,
yeah.
So I'll talk about the tables that have a few less numbers on them, but are still no less important. So we start with we're on slide 6. Rose, if we want to advance one there. Perfect. Okay. And so for the current year renewal, we have our carriers kind of going across the top, and you can read them in the columns. And then the total represents the composite renewal across all of those different carriers and coverages. And, you can see this highlighted number of 2.69, and that is the ultimate story of our starting place for the renewal this year. So that we are at 2.69, and that is below our 3.4% target, which is great news and a great place to be, and a much improved position than we saw during our preliminary renewal discussions a couple months ago. So Moda is now coming in at about 3.1%, Kaiser at 4.5%, Delta at -4%. Kaiser Dental and Willamette Dental both coming in at 0 or flat, and Moda coming in at -5.6 on vision, Kaiser at 3.1 positive on vision, and VSP in a renewal guarantee currently at with a flat renewal. So again, 2.69%, very, very good. Any questions on that before we kind of dive into a few more considerations, and then we'll look at each of those renewals in just a little bit more detail. Okay, so slide 7, we'll look at, we take one more quick peek at our proposed Rsr balances. As we mentioned earlier, as was discussed earlier, these are the funds from which we are considering paying for some of the program improvements. We are currently expecting with Moda at the end of the plan year in October 2022 to have a balance of just a little over 21 million, and Kaiser to have a balance of just a little bit over 15 million. And those would be the funds from which we would withdraw and pay for example, the diabetes prevention programs. Any questions on that before we sort of dive into our individual renewal results? All right, riveting discussion. Okay, we can move to slide 9, Rose. And these are all pretty good stories. So we've tried to keep the information fairly light. We can see on slide 9 here, we have a Kaiser coming in at 4.52. You'll note that this is a reduction from the preliminary renewal, so we're very pleased with that. And that there are really no changes in taxes and fees this year. So recall that we are gauged against our 3.4% target on a before taxes and fees basis. So that gives the board a little bit of grace if the government comes in and says, hey, we're going to put a 2% or 3% tax onto rates. We are not responsible for benefit changes resulting from that. All right, so wanted to point out that Kaiser is still using a trend just a little bit below 6%. And they have an administrative cost increase of about 2%. And in the final renewal here, they did offer a rate concession of 1% in partnership with OEB to bring that rate down into a more sustainable level. So really appreciate that. The final renewal also does include a small change for alternative care benefits. Any questions on that? All right, we can move forward to slide 11 and we'll address the Moda renewal. There's a little bit more complexity in the Moda renewal, in particular because we did use some RSR funds last year to buy the rate down by about 0.5%. And as we know, when we buy down the rates, today we get to pay for it tomorrow. And so we've included a little bit of an illustration here that sort of shows the impact of that. And you can see on the first bar off to the left, the renewal before, had we not reduced it with RSR, would have come in at about 2.54%. But because we bought that renewal down, that means our starting place this year is going to be a little lower. And so when we move from that lower starting place, which is sort of the bottom of that little blue section or our purple plan cost section, our starting place is a little lower and it takes a little bit more increase to get to our projected position. So instead of having a 2.5% rate increase this year, that's where we end up with just a little bit over that 3% level. So kind of that leveraging effect from using the RSR funds last year. Any questions from the board on that? Okay. All right. So we also thought it would be helpful to just do a little bit of a breakout on slide 12 here of the Moda renewal. And so, really, had we not used any of the RSR funds and had we not had mandated benefit changes, the rate increase would have been about 1.7%. But however, when we layer on the prior RSR impact that we saw on the previous slide of about 0.5%, and we layer on about 0.8% impact from mandated benefit changes, we really go from that 1.7 up to the 2.2 and ultimately up to the 3%. So kind of just talking about a little bit of the components of that rate increase. Any questions on that? All right, so when we finally move to slide 13 here, we can see that when we added in those impact of the taxes and changes in fees, our increase drops from 3.05% to 3%. Some of you may have been wondering why we have so many decimal places on here, and that's why, sometimes these things do get a little bit on the precise side. In the renewal, Moda used a combined medical pharmacy trend rate of 4.58%, and they did reduce the margin in this final from 1% to 0.5%. And that reflects the strong plan performance that we've had and the growing surplus amount that we have to kind of buffer any adverse deviation. We do have an increase of about 3% in general administrative fees in there. And unless there are any questions, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Jenny to talk about some of those proposed plan changes that Moda had this year.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the optional plan design changes or program changes that the board can consider. So back in February, we talked about the top 3 changes that are listed here on this table. And then we, since then, have also talked at some length with the board about the possibility of making some changes to how much members pay out of their pocket for medical and pharmacy costs. And so we're going to talk about a couple of those options today. And then finally, the one on this table is the coordinated behavioral health program, which I believe was approved by the board earlier in the meeting. So we'll review all of these. But again, as we talked about the top 3, the first one is, just aligning coverage for diabetes services to be the same whether or not the person is pregnant or not. That's a plan change that Moda proposed and was reviewed and accepted largely by the board at the February meeting. The second one has to do with covering continuous glucose monitors only under the pharmacy benefit, which is just a more efficient way and cost-effective way to get those glucose monitors. Again, that was discussed in the February meeting and generally accepted by the board. And then the third one is a continuation or an expansion of a program that OEB has already adopted, and it's called the site of care for oncology medications. And really what that means is, making sure to steer members to the most cost-effective place to get certain oncology medications. That sometimes if you are able to get some of those infusions done at home or at certain places, it's much more cost-effective both for the plan and for the member if you can steer them. And so just expanding that. And again, that change was largely accepted by the board at February. So what we're going to do over the next 5-10 minutes or so is we're going to talk in a little more detail about the middle changes. So eliminating this feature of the Moda plans called the maximum cost share. There's two different options. So and we'll talk quite a bit about this. So the first option one is really just eliminating that and then having all of a member's medical and pharmacy costs accrue to the medical maximum out-of-pocket limit. And I am going to explain this in more detail in the next few minutes. So that one, just at a high level, is a benefit enhancement. And so adopting option one is going to increase the overall Moda renewal by about 0.7%, and we'll show you exactly how that will apply to the rates by plan. At the last board meeting, after some discussion, there was some interest in looking at an alternative option. That's like, well, we maybe want to get rid of the maximum cost share feature because we liked some of that idea, but we're not sure we liked the premium impact on the plan. So can you, Willis Towers Watson, show us an option to, make adjustments to the medical out-of-pocket limit so that we can simplify the plan, but there isn't a premium impact. And so we will show you details about that option in a few slides. So down at the bottom, what I can say is that if you, and I'll repeat this on the next slide too, is that if you purely just take the top three changes on this table that say accept, the Moda renewal is going to be 2.88%. If you accept all of those and you want to take the benefit enhancement for the member cost sharing, then the Moda renewal is going to be 3.58% or 3.5%. So on the next page,
hey Jenny,
yeah.
real quick,
Yeah.
just from a logistical standpoint, logistical is not the right way to say it, but
Sure.
what we'll do is go through the maximum cost share options. I think we'll vote on an option after that, and then we'll come back to page 14 and vote on the slate.
Yeah, I think we've repeated a version of this slide a few times to try to make the flow go as well as we can. So what I'm going to do is on the next slide, I'll talk again about the three sort of packages that you have. And if Brad and I were putting this together, it's like, well, we kind of want to know, do all of these packages, are they within our budget? So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to explain that here in a few minutes. Then I'm going to get into, on the following slides, a little more detail about what these changes will actually mean to members and to the premium rates. And then at the end of this, a lot of that discussion, we will come back to a slide that looks just like this, and then you can vote on your decision.
Great.
We've got plenty of time, I think, to discuss. This is probably the most complicated topic, I would say, out of the renewal, which is a good thing, because we're talking about perhaps making things simpler for members. But again, scenario A is really just taking, accepting only the top three things from the prior slide and not making any plan changes to the maximum cost share feature. So if you just do that, You can see down below your Moda renewal is 2.88. And what that does, if you look all the way to the right, is your weighted average target becomes a little over 2.5. And so again, that's below the 3.4% target. Moda scenario B takes, scenario A and adds in the benefit enhancement for eliminating the maximum cost share. And it's the one where, we're going to just eliminate that max cost share, make it simpler for members, and we're not going to change the medical maximum out of pocket. And again, I will explain those in the next couple of slides. So that one bumps up both the Moda renewal and it bumps up your total aggregate renewal off to the right to 3.04. But again, it's under the 3.4% target. So you're within the ability to go ahead and accept that change. And then scenario C, which is the new scenario where we eliminate the maximum cost share, but we increase the medical maximum out of pocket. That one just doesn't have a premium impact. It only has a plan design impact. And again, I'll explain that in the next couple slides. Okay, so let's dive in on the next slide. I think it's helpful just to take a quick look back about how the Moda plans work. And we're talking today about Moda's plans 1 through 5. Plans 6 and 7, there's not going to be any changes for those plans related to this because they don't have these two different maximum out-of-pocket or max cost share accruals. So the out-of-pocket maximum, and then actually, Rose, let's just go to the next slide because I think it's just it's easier to see it. Okay, so what you see on this slide is these are the current plan designs for Moda, and we're showing you the PCP 360 benefit levels. So just to orient you, we've got the deductibles at the top so that you can, if you're familiar with the Moda plans, you can follow along. But the Moda plans have two different kinds of features. One of them is called the out-of-pocket maximum. And what accrues to that are anyone's deductibles, medical co-payments, and medical co-insurance amounts. And so you see here on plan 1 that the amount out-of-pocket maximum for that plan is $2,850. So what that means is if a member has medical expenses, like a very expensive hospitalization, and it's, their out-of-pocket costs are going to be limited to $2,850. Now, for most plans that we see out in the marketplace, that truly means that's the most that you're going to pay in a year for medical services. But the Moda plans have a separate feature called the maximum cost share. And what accrues to those are everything in the out-of-pocket maximum, but also pharmacy co-payments and things like additional cost tier. So what that means for a member is that if in that example that I gave you for plan 1, if a member has a very high, hospitalization, they've paid $28.50 out of their pocket for that hospitalization. If they have additional pharmacy costs for the rest of the year, they're going to continue paying the pharmacy co-payments that you see down below. And then those pharmacy co-payments will accrue up to that $7,900. So, just me explaining it has taken a few minutes, so it is a bit complicated. The reason that we're talking about this change is to kind of is to make things simpler. So what we're talking about in option 1 is to essentially eliminate the second tier. So eliminating the max cost share line, the $7,900, so that all medical costs, pharmacy costs, will accrue to the member's out-of-pocket maximum, that $28.50. Right, so they're not going to have those pharmacy costs for the rest of the year. Again, that is a benefit enhancement, and so that's why there is, and what you can see, or maybe, come to find out through, and understanding these plans, is that it's a bigger benefit enhancement for plan 1 than it is for plan 5, because just fewer people end up hitting a $6,800 medical maximum out of pocket. So we'll talk a little bit more when you see the premium impact by plan, but it's not going to be a 0.7% premium impact for each one of the plans. It's going to vary depending on the plan. So I'm going to pause real quick and see if anyone has questions about Moda option 1 for the max cost share.
This is Bill. I don't have a question because it's for me. I get it. I've been advocating for this. For me, I just want to point out that this is a plan enhancement that does affect all, but for me personally, it affects our lower income people the most and brings them more into less of a chance of having catastrophic financial breakdown due to a large medical expense. And that's the people I want to advocate for. And I know this is an increase, but it really is about helping our non-licensed staff that are covered by OEB and really gives them better protection. So I advocate for option 1.
Okay. That's helpful. I think I'm just going to make a little bit of a change here based on what we're talking about. And let's go, Rose, to, I think it's slide 19. So that we can see, yeah, so just so that you can see the premium impact for option 1 that we're talking about. Again, it's a benefit enhancement. What we did on this slide is we started with the Moda renewal of just over 3%. We're going to assume that you accept the benefit changes that were noted in the top 3 rows of that earlier slide. So we're starting with a renewal of 2.88%. So down below, what you can see is that 2.88% isn't the same for each plan. That's the renewal for plans 6 and 7 because this particular proposed plan design change doesn't impact those plans. But you can see that plan 1 would have almost a 4.5% increase, and plan 5 would have a 3.3% increase. Okay. So let's
hold on, Tom.
What happens? The only additional thing is what happens to the additional cost tier. Does that get thrown into the out-of-pocket maximum?
Yes, that would accrue to that middle, that 2,850.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about option 2, and that is going to be on slide 7. Now I've lost track here.
Slide 20, Jenny.
Slide 20, thank you. Okay. All right, so there we go. Option 2, I'll just draw your attention down to the bottom table. So we've been talking about plan 1 with a maximum out-of-pocket for the medical piece of $2,850, and then you've got that separate max cost share of $7,900. So in option 2, what the board said is, well, we're not sure we really like that premium impact. What can you do with the current out-of-pocket maximum level? Can you increase those so that there's no premium impact to members? Because it's a trade-off, so it's a good thing to look at this. So in that scenario, you'll see down at the bottom, everybody is getting a 2.88% Moda increase. What you want to also look at is the line right above that, which is the new out-of-pocket maximum for everything. So instead of having the 2 separate out-of-pocket limits, you'd have 1, but it's a higher limit for each plan. So in plan 1, it goes from $2,850 up to $3,600. And then you can see, it changes accordingly down for the rest of the plans. So let's, I'm trying to figure out which is my considerations page. Go back to that. So slide 18. I'm just keeping you on your toes. So, all right. So what's the impact to members? So we talked a little bit about this in March, but there's about 4,000 members, OEB members, who last year exceeded the medical out-of-pocket maximum and continued to have costs that they had to pay out of pocket for pharmacy and the additional cost here. Most of the time it's pharmacy. When members do exceed that that limit, the average excess was about $800. That's an average. There's far fewer people who actually meet the maximum cost share limits that are set by each plan. So we've talked that there's a premium impact. I think it's an important consideration that, if you go with the option 1, which is the benefit enhancement, that benefit enhancement is going to provide something better for a subset of OEB members, but everyone is going to pay the higher premium. On option 2, everyone's going to see an out-of-pocket maximum increase, but again, not as many members hit that maximum out-of-pocket limit. So it may be a change that a lot of members just won't notice. But it does certainly make things simpler for OEB and the carrier and Moda to communicate. And I would hope that it would make things easier for members to understand in terms of their benefits. It looks like there's some questions. Sure, who is first?
Let's say Michelle.
So if I recall, there are out-of-pocket maximums both for in-network and out-of-network, and there are out-of-pocket maximums for individuals and for families. So I'm just wondering if these changes that you're showing us for the individual would be reflected across all of those categories.
Yes, you're exactly right. There are differences in not only in-network and out-of-network, but there's also differences in the PCP 360 benefit level that we're showing you today and the non-PCP 360 benefit level. So those differences will continue. It's just that there won't be that separate layer for people who have pharmacy costs. Now, the federal government does set its own maximum cost share limit. And so, those are still going to be in the background. And so folks, there's still going to be limits, whether you're in the PCP 360 level or the non-PCP 360 level. So those limits will stay the same. But really, we're just talking about how pharmacy costs accrue for members. I don't know if did I help? Okay.
Thanks.
I think my hand's up.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. Yeah, I did. You got buried there. Sorry.
So I'm curious why you chose to include the additional cost tier in this maximum out, since that was designed to steer people to a particular behavior, and why that didn't stay outside of the maximum cost.
Yeah, you certainly can keep the additional cost here out of the accruals. It's literally just a way to make things simpler for folks to understand.
Do we lose the effectiveness of it?
You will, yes, especially in the richer plans 1, 2.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. This is Tom. I don't think you actually lose the effectiveness, because the people who are having, the big hits are the high ones are the back surgeries, the knee and hip replacements. Those people, because they're expensive surgeries, very well may hit into the out-of-pocket maximums anyway, so they're already paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. What's an additional $500? I think the main impact on the additional cost here is in things like the sleep studies and the advanced imaging and things like that. There's a whole lot more of them, and they're going to, and in general, they're going to be people who are not hitting into the out-of-pocket maximums. That's a guess, but it seems intuitive.
Jeff, was there something else, or is that your previous hand?
I think that I'm, well, I certainly don't want to create another meeting this month. So there's an incentive for me to just be quiet now. But I think I'm leaning towards the raising the out-of-pocket maximum, the combined one, for a revenue neutral renewal. And I'm wanting to make sure that gets discussed.
Okay. JJ. You're muted, I think.
Sorry. In previous meetings, we talked about the comparability of the OEB plan richness versus other public sector plans. And generally, we looked fairly favorable in the totality of our offering. However, our max out of pocket was substantively higher than what is typical in other public sector agencies. And I think that is a detriment to the totality of our benefits structure. And because of that, I would recommend that we go with the option one. It does increase the rates a little bit, although we have the flexibility this year to do that because we are under the 3.4 target.
I'm raising
any
two
other
from a strategic standpoint. You know, not just to make a decision today, but to make one that helps us in the future as well. And I won't tie in my sword over it. I'm just raising it.
Sure.
I mean, you could make the argument that you don't increase the maximum out of pockets yet. I mean, if we end up having to do that, if inflation rises, then if we've done it now, it's going to be incredibly difficult to do it later.
Yes.
Okay, Michelle.
I'm also leaning toward option one, actually. And I just, the way I think of it is, who are we going to ask to pay for this change? Are we going to spread it out equally among members via premiums, or are we going to concentrate the cost of this change onto people who are experiencing like catastrophic health events, which really could be any of us in the coming year. So, I mean, in my mind, that's what insurance is supposed to do, is spread out these costs among a lot of people so that it doesn't hurt any small group more than it needs to.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else? Okay, so Jenny, are we at a point where it's appropriate to vote on option one or option two, or is there something else on that topic?
Yes, yeah. So we have structured it on slide 21 to vote for one of the packages, Moda scenario A, B, or C. Let's go to slide 21. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a motion?
All right.
That, can I make a motion that the board directs staff to adopt scenario B in this slide, third 21 as presented? Option one.
We have a motion for scenario B, which includes option one. Yes. Do I have a second for that? JJ seconds. Okay, so we will we'll vote on, the motion is to adopt renewal scenario B on page 21. That includes option number one, which increases the total Moda increase to 3.04%. All those in favor of scenario B?
No.
I'm sorry.
The Moda's increases it to 3.58. The
oh, you're
total,
right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The total. You're exactly right. Sorry, I misstated that.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of Moda renewal scenario B signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed signify by saying nay. Okay, the ayes have it. We have adopted Moda renewal scenario B as described on page 21.
Okay.
All right,
good.
Jenny.
Let's move to slide 22. I think you've made on this slide 2 of the 3 decisions. So you just need to formally approve the Kaiser renewal on this page.
Oh, well, I'll entertain a motion on that. The motion would be to approve the Kaiser renewal at 4.52%.
So moved.
Second, Sue.
Who's made that motion? Okay,
Second,
I
Sue.
think Dr. Sue. Yeah. All those in favor of adopting the Kaiser proposed renewal of 4.52% say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, that motion has passed as well. All right, Jenny, where are we?
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brad. He's going to walk you through the dental and vision renewals.
All right, so not quite as complicated as the maximum cost share. So you can all sit back and breathe a little bit more. We'll on slide 24 here, we'll take a quick look at our dental renewals for all the carriers. Recall that we have Moda or Delta coming in at -4% and both Kaiser and Lamet coming in at 0%, kind of as we're sitting in a baseline position. And then we're going to talk about a plan change of a consideration for Moda on slide 25 here. You know, currently our -4% rate decrease includes an increase in our administrative costs of about 1.8%, a trend of 3%, and no margin this year. And Moda has proposed for the upcoming plan year implementing their preventive first benefit. And this benefit would not apply the cost of most preventive services to the annual maximum. So this essentially effectively increases the annual maximum by the cost of whatever those preventive services might be. And the argument of that is they want to have more dollars available for folks that need more expensive historical or surgical work. This change is consistent with Moda's book of business and would increase the renewal by approximately 3%. All right, so we can go into a little bit more of that, and we have some information on the next slide before we look at decisions that kind of provides us a reminder of the various Moda, dental benefit designs and the rate change for each plan if the preventive first benefit were adopted. So the new overall rate changes, instead of being all of them at -4, would vary from -2.5 for the newer EPO incentive plan up to a positive 0.6% increase for the lower cost plan 6. And overall, the rate impact would go from -4 to -1%. All right.
Yeah, that shows up on slide 26.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. All right, so I'll kind of repeat just a couple of those and give you a quick orientation. You know, we have the plans going from sort of a more rich plan 1 to plan 5 to the least rich plan 6. And then we have our exclusive PPO provider or PPO plans, which would be in-network only type of plans where we have a little bit richer on the incentive plan at $2,300 out-of-pocket maximum, and then our regular or more long-standing EPO plan at $1,500 out-of-pocket maximum. And you can kind of see as you go along, we have enrolled members. We have the bulk of our members enrolled in Plan 1, which is our richest benefit. And then we have quite a few members still enrolled in 5 and 6 and much fewer in both of the EPO plans. We have the current rate going across kind of in the middle there. And that is the composite rate, which represents a blend of various enrollment tiers. And then we have kind of what the renewal rate would be. So you can see a dollar impact from these changes and then a percentage change at the bottom. And that's where we're going to see the variation from, kind of the PPO, the EPO incentive plan at -2.5 to plan 6 at a positive 0.6, and our highest enrolled plan, which is plan 1, at a -1.5. So again, when we take all of those pieces together, much like the renewal option that we saw for the medical, we are going to have some varying rates, but that's because the impact of this benefit changes varies by plan.
Okay, thanks. Tom?
I'm in favor of this change for several reasons. Number one, it keeps people from having to debate, should I have preventive services when I know I'm going to also have some need for using the benefit for restorative work. Second, it doesn't, we're still not increasing the costs of dental care for the people. Third, it helps us actually get closer to the aggregate 3.4%. And if you remember, just because you saved it, you were under 3.4% one year, it doesn't mean you get to bank that difference. So I think for all those reasons, this is a great recommendation.
And any other questions or comments on that? And we will certainly get to a decision point in just a couple minutes here. All right, we can move to slide 27. Just a very brief overview of the Kaiser dental renewal. Recall it's at 0. While Kaiser did offer underwriting this year, the rate change was set to 0%, and that is consistent with Kaiser's broader book of business, and no benefit changes were proposed. Then we can move on to slide 28, which is Willamette. Willamette's renewal is coming in flat again this year. They did use a trend of just a hair under 6%, no changes to their administrative fees. They do have a projected RSR balance of $880,000, which is the maximum allowed under the contract. In the next year, Willamette did also propose to continue to waive co-pays for OEB members that have not been to a Willamette dental facility. And that's hoped to increase preventive utilization. They did provide some statistics, from March 2021 to mid-January of 2022. That ongoing incentive was associated with almost 1,300 new patient office visits. And they did not propose any benefit changes. Any questions there before we move on to slide 29? Okay, so similar to how we looked at the medical, we've put together a couple of different scenarios, or option A and option B around the delta dental change. We can see for option A, does not incorporate that preventive first benefit. Scenario B does incorporate that preventive first benefit, and as we look down, we have anticipated that the medical changes would be adopted as they were. So that Moda medical at 3.58 represents the change and benefit enhancement to that out-of-pocket maximum. And as we look at scenario A, if we do nothing, of course, we're still at our 3.04 that we had just looked at. If we do incorporate the Delta Dental preventive first change, that rate decrease goes from -4 to -1, and the overall change moves from 3.04 to 3.23. All right, so with that in mind, we can move to slide 30, which is kind of our decision framework. And we have a couple of different options for the boards, along with our, the staff and Willis Towers Watson recommendation. We could, either elect to have our Delta renewal or Moda renewal at -4%, or we could have it at, and pardon, that's an incorrect sign on option B. That should be -1%. And then we also have our Kaiser renewal and Willamette Renewal, which we are recommending to accept as proposed.
Okay, so how about this? We'll split this into two different motions. Let's do the first one, the no change ones for Kaiser and Willamette Dental.
So moved.
Okay, motion to accept the no changes on both. Do I have a second?
Second, Bill.
Okay, Bill seconded. All in favor of accepting the no change proposals from Kaiser and Willamette Dental for dental renewals, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, ayes have it. As far as the Delta Dental renewal options, we have two options. I'll entertain a motion on one or the other or both. No, I guess it's just one or the other.
Ms. Bill, I'll move that we accept staff recommendation for Delta Dental option B to have a negative 1% effect on rate change for the year.
This is Sue. I'll second that.
Okay, Sue seconded. All in favor of Delta Dental renewal option B, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Okay, that one is also passed. We're on to vision.
All right, so we can move to slide 32. And here you can see we have a kind of our vision overall renewals with Kaiser coming in at 3.1%. And recall that Kaiser is community rated. So this follows their overall book of business. We have Moda coming in at a negative 5.6% increase, and BSP is in the year 2 of a 4-year rate guarantee. So they would be coming in at flat. All right. And so really, if we move on to slide 33, not a lot of complexity here. And we have our renewal decision points. We're really, both staff and Willis Towers Watson just recommend to accept these renewals as proposed.
Any discussion on vision? Do I have a proposal?
JJ, move to accept all three.
Bill
Okay.
second.
We have a JJ first, Bill second. All those in favor of accepting the vision renewals as listed on page 33, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, passed another.
All right, and with that, we'll turn it over to Jenny to walk us through the remaining program renewals.
Yeah, so next in our report is the Employee Assistance Program. And as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, I was not at the last board meeting. So just before this, I was reading through the minutes. It looks like the board already approved the EAP, but I guess I would just ask for some assurance on that. I can certainly review the EAP renewal one more time, but if it's already been approved, I don't know if we need to.
Jenny, this is Ollie. Staff will be bringing a list of RFPs in the near future to the board to prioritize. So this will be one of them.
Okay, but the actual EAP renewal was approved?
I think it was.
Yeah. I was just addressing the RFP situation, but yes.
Yes, we did recommend that you actually do a formal procurement in the future, but certainly need to renew the program for 2022. Okay, good. Well then, Rose, we can move to the next section, which is talking about life and disability. So I'll do a quick recap of the life insurance first, and then we'll move to the disability programs. And back in February, we did provide you with the proposed renewal positions from the standard. The proposed renewal positions do represent both standards proposed position as well as our negotiations with the standard. And so for the most part, so really we've come to a place where we collectively agree on what the right renewal position is. But just at a high level, what you can see on this page is that life insurance, there's several different types of life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment benefits. Some of the benefits are paid for by the employer and others are fully paid for by the employee as a voluntary benefit. So you can see that in that column. We've shown for you the last time this renewed, which was 4 years ago, what that renewal position was, just for reference. And then in the fourth column over, you can see the proposed rate change by line of coverage. So the basic life, the standard is proposing a 15% decrease. For the basic dependent life, no change. Basic accidental death and dismemberment is a 33% reduction in rates. For the optional employee life, the standard proposed a 55% reduction in life rates. And I guess I may get into this on the next page, but we reviewed at the February board meeting a couple of different options for the optional life, but the general consensus from the board was to just go ahead and accept the 55% rate reduction. And so I'll review that again on the next slide or two. What we're going to be talking about today is the optional spouse life coverage. So the standard has proposed a 10% decrease based on discussion back in February. Some of the board members asked if we could consider some further reductions to optional spouse life, and so we'll take a look at that. And then there's no change to the optional child life and accidental death and dismemberment, and a 25% decrease to the optional AD&D. So that's what we're starting with. The standard has proposed a 4-year rate guarantee for all of these lines of coverage. Let's go to the next slide.
And Jenny, I think we have a question.
Okay. Oh, is there a question?
Yeah, it's Tom. Whenever I see a 55% decrease on something as basic as life insurance, it's not like there's been a 55% reduction in death. It suggests, or it makes me worry, have we been ripped off for the previous period of time? It just, particularly then when it goes forward for an additional 4 years, it just doesn't seem right to me, but I don't know much about this stuff.
Yeah, so what I can give you a little bit of feedback. So 4 years ago when we looked at this, we also felt like the optional life was overpriced at the time for the experience. Now, when you look at life insurance, you take a long view of experience, and OEB has only been in existence really since 2007. So you have to understand that the experience for this type of program is unfolding. But 4 years ago, we still felt like that the program was higher priced than it needed to be. So rather than going with a huge rate decrease 4 years ago, we went with a 15% decrease and an opportunity to open up the program for an open enrollment, which just means anyone who hadn't selected optional life before could have a chance to purchase it. Normally, you don't get the chance to do that without going through a guarantee issue. The second thing we did was we increased the guarantee issue amount. So what that did was we gave members a lower price point, but it did also open up the plan to more risk. And so we didn't want to go out with a huge rate decrease and opening up the risk 4 years ago. But what we saw from that time is that, a number of OEB members took advantage of the open enrollment opportunity and signed up for coverage. And at the same time, there hasn't been as many claims as we had seen before. Now, standard tells me in the last part of 2021 and the first part of 2022, there have been some claims. So we have to kind of keep that on watch. So we wouldn't suggest going lower than the 55% rate decrease. But I hope that provides a little bit of color.
No, that helped.
Yeah.
That really helps me understand.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next page. I do want to point out that the OEB program does have, or the standard has what we call a claim fluctuation reserve account. for, there's 4 different accounts, 2 for life insurance and 2 for the disability programs. And that it's just a different type of word or a different phrase, but it means the same thing as a rate stabilization reserve. It's essentially when experience runs well and you're able to bank some funds into these reserves, you can tap into them in a future year when experience isn't running really well. And so you can offset some rate increases for the future. So we do have some, balances, especially in the optional life. So it's a pretty sizable balance on this optional life, especially when it's compared to the annual premium for that line of coverage on the employee paid side. And it looks like now the standard will update these projections when we get a little bit closer, but at the end of the contract year, when we did these calculations, the standard was on track to provide another sizable contribution to that optional life CFR. And so because the balances become, pretty significant, again, in relation to the premium that's paid, at the last board meeting in February, we looked at options to not only reduce the optional life rate by 55%, but also asked standard for ways to, what's another way that we can spend this money for the members' benefit. And so we looked at a couple of options to add on a critical life insurance policy to that program. And we looked at, a couple of different options for that. Essentially, what you'd be doing is using the CFR to pay for those policies, and that would only last about 3 or 4 years. And then those, you'd either have to find another way to pay for the policies or those policies would need to go away. So at the end of the discussion, the board essentially said, we're not really sure we want to put in that temporary benefit. So instead of doing that, would you come back with a couple of options to reduce the spouse optional life rate? So that's, the program where if you want to buy additional life insurance for your spouse. So on the next slide, we did get a couple of options from the standard for that program. So in keeping with our theme, we've got option A, B, and C. Option A is essentially the renewal as proposed so far by the standard. And then option B is passing on a 15% rate reduction in the optional spouse life. And then option C is passing on a 20% rate reduction for the optional spouse life. And then what we've shown you in the last 2 rows of this table is, again, there's that sizable CFR account. And if we go ahead and go with some of these rate decreases, what does that do to the balance? And you can kind of see that it moves it a little bit. It eats into the CFR balance a little, but not a lot, just because of the volume and the rate for optional for the spouse life. I think, I don't know if there's any questions at this point.
I don't see any.
Okay.
Any
So
questions?
I guess at this point, it's good to kind of consider which option you might like to go with. We have recommended option C. Now, option C only because it does kind of eat into the claim fluctuation reserve a little bit. The spouse optional life traditionally has been running just fine. It hasn't been overpriced, I guess, as the employee optional life has been. However, we still feel like this is a pretty sustainable rate position. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, and here's where we can make some final decisions.
Okay, so let's work on the optional spouse life, the 3 options, and then accept, and then we'll vote to accept the proposed, the recommended changes.
And this
So
is
optional
Tom.
spouse life. Yeah.
This is Tom. I move that we accept option C.
Second.
Okay, Jeff seconded. Any discussion on option C? Okay. All right. All those in favor of adopting option C for the optional spouse life? Wow, lots of options. Signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? All right. So the next motion would be something like moving to accept all the life insurance proposals on page 44, including option C.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adopting all of the recommended changes on page 44, including the option C, which we've already voted on, signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? We are one unanimous group today. All right.
Okay, so we can go, let's talk about disability programs. Okay, so again, we did review these preliminary positions on the short-term and long-term disability plans at the February board meeting. And the general consensus on the board was to accept the proposed rate changes for the disability programs. And what that is for, and again, we break this into employee paid, which is also referred to as voluntary, and then employer paid. So no change to the employee or the employer paid short-term disability rates. For the long-term disability, there's a proposed 25% rate reduction for the voluntary LTD, and no change for the employee paid LTD program. I'll go ahead and point out that what you can see at the last time we renewed this, that the short-term disability rates also had a 20% decrease 4 years ago. And then I'll explain to you on the next page about the CFR account, but there's a good, there's a balance on the CFR account for the employee paid disability programs. And so 2 years ago, when the state had just passed the law for the Oregon paid family medical leave, what we could see is that there's probably not going to be a need to OEB to have these short-term disability program plans. So the board made a conscious decision to reduce the rates by 50% 2 years ago, below what we thought would be needed to sustain the program, specifically in order to eat up the claim fluctuation reserve accounts for the employee paid coverages. So on the next page, just kind of see the balances on those programs. So the employee paid has $4 million in the account. There's going to be probably another addition to that at the end of this contract year. So it might be a little bit closer to $5 million. Turns out that during COVID, people didn't go out on disability as often as they did before. But that said, so we didn't eat into the CFR as much as we thought we would, even by reducing rates by 50%. So on the next page, we'll go ahead and have everybody vote on the rate positions for the disability plans. We might have gone too far, or did we? Yeah, 47. Oh, I guess we did. Sorry. All right. Well, I guess before we vote, I'll talk a little bit about the upcoming Oregon paid family medical leave on slide 48, Rose. Okay. So, as I mentioned, the state passed a law that's going to basically provide a benefit for paid family medical leave. And the benefit goes into effect on September 3rd, 2023. So today you're going to vote on the disability renewals that go into effect October of 2022. And then this new benefit will come into effect 11 months after that time. So the Oregon Paid Family Medical Leave program is largely going to provide as good as, or probably a better benefit than what the short-term disability plans offered through OEB provide today. So in all likelihood, we're going to recommend discontinuing the short-term disability plans after the PFML becomes effective. One thing just to be aware of is that the all employees in the state of Oregon will need to start making contributions to the state to fund the program beginning this January. So just to be aware of that. Let's see.
And what's the percentage that, I'm sorry, I have a question, Robert.
Sure. What was the question?
So what is the percentage members have to contribute to this disabilities program starting on the date set of their employment? I mean, out of their paychecks.
Yeah, it's based on earnings, so it just really depends on the person's earnings. Yeah.
I think the maximum is 0.6% of whatever rate that they set. 60% of, I think the maximum is 1%, but I'm not totally sure on that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Did you want to add something, David Scarce?
Guess I could take my mute off there. Yeah, the way the plan is currently set up is that, 0.6% is paid by the employee and 0.4% is paid by the employer. So it's kind of a 40-60 split, with the employees picking up 60% of the premium and the employer is picking up 40% of the premium.
Okay, Jenny, did we go back up to 46 and vote on page 46? Is that where you want to head?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, I will entertain a motion on the disability program renewal.
I had a quick question before.
Oh yeah, go.
What happens to the reserve fund for the short-term disability when everybody is covered by now the state program?
It can be used for the long-term disability.
Yeah, I can answer that. Tom, the reserve fund is made up, as Jenny mentioned. There's a fund that has the employer dollars and there's a fund that has the employee dollars. So the reserve right now that's on the employee side covers both voluntary short-term disability and voluntary long-term disability.
Okay, great.
So we'll still provide protection for the rates under voluntary long-term disability.
Super. So that would mean, okay, got it. Thank you.
Come on now, I need a motion. We're almost motioned out, but we need one here.
Move to accept all of the proposed plans.
For disability.
Yeah.
Second.
46.
Okay. And second.
All those in favor? Oh, thank you, Sue. All those in favor of accepting the proposed disability program renewal rates signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. What now?
I think I just gave you 15 minutes.
We are, okay, so we're done with the renewal actions, I assume then, huh?
We're done.
Okay. Okay, we are, let me go back to the agenda real quick. Okay, yes, we are 10 minutes early. I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to take a 10-minute break right now, and then we'll go into health equity and other business. So let's come back at 3:04.
Did you really just say we're done?
We're not done. No, we're
But
done with
rates.
renewals.
We're done with rates.
Okay. All right. So I'll see y'all. Let's make it 3:05 now. See you at 3:05.
Hey, you leaving?
Yeah, I'm friends.
Okay, have fun.
All right, I'll see you.
Nice seeing you again. Yep.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. It is 3:05, and we're going to talk health equity. Who is running this portion of the show?
It's Michael Garrett.
Michael, welcome.
Great. Let me introduce myself if I could. So, okay, if I get started?
Oh, absolutely. We're ready to go.
Great. So I'm Michael Garrett. I'm a principal in the Total Health Management Specialty Practice at Mercer. I use he, him, his pronouns. I've been with Mercer for 6.5 years. I've worked in healthcare for 40, actually more than 40. I have a behavioral health background, also board certified in case management and patient advocacy, and I lead Mercer's diversity, equity, inclusion, and health and benefits solutions. And so I'm here today to talk about some health equity work. And Tom and Sue have been involved in some of the health equity work group meetings. So this is going to be a repeat for you, the two of them, but thought would give an overview about health equity and then two major work streams that have come out of that work. You know, the next slide. So I want to do the overview, the DEI benefit vendor assessment, update, the health equity screening tool process, and topics, and then the criteria that we're using to evaluate any benefit changes to go through the health equity screening process. You go to the next slide. Yep, thanks. So I'm not sure if everybody's aware, and many of you may be, but OHA has had a health equity committee for some time now, and back in the fall of 2019, right before the pandemic, they issued a report with their recommendations on definition of health equity, which you can read there, as well as some assumptions and values around health equity. There's different definitions of health equity. Essentially, what we want to, and I'll paraphrase what it says on the slide, which you can read, but essentially is to not have any variation in the access or experience or clinical outcomes based on any kind of demographics. Present in your membership. Lots of studies have shown that there are health inequities or health disparities. So this definition pretty much aligns with other definitions of health equity. And I would just suggest to you, since OHA has this committee that included a number of stakeholders over a number of period of time, that we use that as the basis for our health equity, how we understand what health equity is. So I just want to show that in terms of what we mean by health equity. You know, the next slide. I would just say also that in order to look at health disparities or health inequities, you have to have data on your membership, which is a critical portion of the work to be done on health equity. Also, the Health Equity Committee of OHA's Health Equity Committee identified these 6 assumptions and values around health equity. And so a couple that I will just point out. The second one, inequities in population health outcomes are primarily a result of social and political injustice and not lifestyles, behaviors, or genes. So the common catchphrase is zip code is a better predictor of mortality and morbidity than genetic code. And so it's not just about changing people's lifestyles, if you would, tobacco or alcohol, certainly that contribute, but rather racism and social inequities drive health inequities and health disparities. The third one is a really important one, and this aligns with a lot of the definitions of health disparities. These are differences that are not only unnecessary and avoidable, but also unjust and unfair. And that leads to the fourth one, which is that equity must be intentionally pursued as a strategy. It just doesn't happen automatically. I'll just also mention that when we talk about equity from an employer's perspective, there's different kinds of equity that you can address. In the private sector, my experience is that pay equity has been a big focus for probably about 10 years. Health equity in commercial plans has only been around for a couple of years. I would say Medicare and Medicaid plans are much further ahead around identifying and addressing health equity issues. And because it's been a requirement either of the state Medicaid plan or CMS for Medicare Advantage plans. I'll also say that health equity was identified in a report more than 20 years ago now for the Institute of Medicine, as it was called back then, called Crossing the Quality Chasm, which equity was identified as one of 6 aims of a high quality, high functioning health system. So safe, timely, effective, efficient, equitable, and patient-centered. And I remember that because it's steep with an extra E. So health equity has been identified as an important component, but only recently, I would say, has health equity been viewed by commercial plans as an important perspective into understanding the impacts of different decisions and benefit coverages in healthcare delivery affecting commercially insured populations.
I'm not going to say it again.
Oh.
This is why I yelled earlier. Turn on your listening ears.
Oh. Someone's asking to turn on listening ears? Sorry. Okay. Must have been. Hopefully that was a student as opposed to a board member. But anyway. So this is all new territory. I just want to say that for commercially insured plans. And we just suggest that we capitalize on the other work that's being done to identify what we mean by health equity. I'm also going to highlight another resource from the state, the State Health Improvement Plan, as a resource for providing the framework for understanding health equity. Go to the next slide. I'm going to pause for a second if there are any questions, because I know that I talk fast. No, okay. So I would just,
Chair.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have one from Enrique.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you talk about equity, but I'm struggling to understand on the economic perspective. Like, I'm happy to hear that Moda and Kaiser and this board is talking about health equity. But to me, equity and economic justice and economic equity are tied in hand. And based on the approvals and the current healthcare costs in our society, and especially in Oregon, high tax state, and we have the homeless issues and we have all the social issues, and a lot of our members work directly with a lot of the impacted folks of society. I believe that it should be within our mission, and maybe I'm ignorant on this, but how is this framework tied to economic equity and racial and social justice equity? I just want to know if, I mean, I just feel like prices keep increasing, so that's not equity to me. So I was just wondering, how do you see that framework here?
I think it's all very much tied. I think socioeconomic status of your members has a direct impact on access to healthcare, the quality of healthcare, the experience of healthcare. My perspective is that there are racial and social justice issues that have to be addressed as well. There's underlying systemic issues within the state, within the country, that need to be addressed. I'm here kind of just focusing on the health equity piece, because as a board and as a health plan, that's what you can focus on. But absolutely, there need to be changes in the economic infrastructure in order to support equity from different perspectives. And the governors would say that as well with her plans. But I'm just coming at it from a health perspective, because that's what you're focused on as a board. Absolutely if you can go to the previous slide. Right, so you can see number 6, everyone has the right to standard of living adequate for health, including nutrition, education, housing, medical care, and necessary social services. But addressing things like underlying structural racism, housing issues, probably outside of the purview of what you can do as a benefit plan sponsor. But they're absolutely tied together. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I mean, it's like, we can't boil the ocean, but what can we do to support health equity?
Yeah, no, thank you. What I was hoping, maybe as a mission of the board, we should tackle how can we decrease payments and healthcare costs within our purview. I guess that was the answer I was looking for. Thank you, though.
Yeah, I will highlight for you the prioritized populations that are highlighted in the State Health Improvement Plan, and one of them is low-wage workers. So I will tie that back to low-wage workers in terms of health equity decision-making. Go to the next slide. And sort of to your point, like, in order to address health equity, it has to involve everyone. And I put members there at the very top, because obviously when we talk about health equity, members are the first priority, and understanding how do decisions, benefit coverage, inclusions, exclusions, and so forth impact your membership population. There are a number of things that could be done, looking at board compensation, for example, in terms of diversity, interactions with elected officials potentially, health systems, carriers and vendors. What can they do to help support health equity with those services that they do? And they very much have been involved, and I appreciate their collaboration in looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion through the lens of how they interact with your members. And then, of course, as consultants, what can we do to support you? Go to the next slide. So Healthier Together Oregon, and I actually have this at the side of my desk, which is the 2020 to 2024 State Health Improvement Plan, came out in September of 2020. And they identify some key strategies to advance health equity. You can see that this also addresses the economic drivers of health, which is what you were sort of talking about, institutional bias. They also identify prioritized populations, and you can see that people with low incomes is one of the prioritized populations. And so as we have implemented this health equity screening process, we try to look at any decisions and policies through the lens of the prioritized populations identified in the State Health Improvement Plan. The State Health Improvement Plan is meant for every stakeholder in the state. And I did notice that Dr. Jim Rickards from Moda Health was one of the partners in the Healthier Together Oregon report. So Moda definitely had involvement with this document, as well as did many other stakeholders, providers, health plans, different racial and ethnic community groups, and so forth, in coming up with the State Health Improvement Plan. So I thought it was a pretty bold statement to say, here's who we're going to focus on. It doesn't mean we're not going to focus on other individuals, and certainly you want to monitor for unintended consequences. And there is a need for data on your members from all of these different demographics to be able to understand where we're at in terms of health equity. We don't have that today, but OHA, I know, has plans to roll out on a voluntary self-identified basis an ability to identify different individuals from these different prioritized population groups. So I would just suggest to you that that gets incorporated as well as you look at health equity. Go to the next slide. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of key initiatives that have rolled out of this health equity group. One is the DEI benefit vendor assessment process. So we looked at 6 benefit vendors, 3 medical plans, the 2 EAPs, and the standard, which is the disability carrier for both PEB and OEB, through the lens of a DEI benefit vendor assessment. That went out in September of 2021. We asked them to complete the questionnaire. They returned it. We went back and forth. We're still going back and forth with a couple of the vendors to get more updated information on their DEI initiatives. We look at from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective. I will just say, because we do not have benchmarking data, this is all very new, that we're not scoring the vendors. We're not giving them a grade. This is really a discovery process. This is kind of the baseline, if you would, of where they're at today. And then what's important to you and your members in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this is where we started. There was some talk with PEB that maybe looking at the vision carrier and the dental carrier may be indicated. I just have to give out a special thanks to your carriers and your benefit vendors for completing the questionnaire. The medical one was very lengthy, 150 questions long. It touched on many different areas. So this was not an easy task for them to complete. So I just appreciate their willingness and ability to do it. And they probably weren't asked these kind of questions before. So again, it's very new. You go to the next slide. So I want to just emphasize that that this is a discovery process. It's not a typical audit, because with an audit, you're using like generally accepted accounting principles or something to be able to identify whether someone is adhering to nationally recognized standards or not. Again, this is really a baseline assessment to see where their strengths, where their opportunities, and then also to show to you kind of what's important to you as a board and for your membership. And then to prioritize any initiatives that you will see rolling out of here where there are potential opportunities for improvements. The next slide. So this is a busy slide, I'll just admit it. This is just to give you a sense of the way we approach this, which are categories of questions. My apologies to Moda and Kaiser because they had the most as a medical carrier due to the complexity of what they offer since they have like provider networks and so forth. I would say probably the EAPs had the next because they do have a provider network, and the standard as a disability carrier had the fewest questions, although there's still probably 75-ish questions that they had to answer. And when we put this together almost 2 years ago now, we came up with categories of questions. Some of the categories apply to all your benefit vendors, like organizational commitment and support, and member services, like their call center. What kind of learning and development do you have for their own staff? That would apply to anybody. Communication are how, for example, websites and apps accommodate people with vision loss and hearing loss. That would apply to any of your vendors. Some are unique, like for example, the standard had a category of questions related to disability case management. And so obviously the other carriers or vendors did not have those questions. We also have questionnaires for other like digital health solutions and so forth. That are adapted for that particular kind of organization, the solutions that they offer. We ask them to answer the questions with yes, no, partial, in development, or other. So yes, they're doing it. No, they're not doing it. It's partially built. It's in the process of being developed and rolled out, or other, and then they provide an explanation. And so that we can get a sense of, again, it's not a scorecard, it's just how they answered the questions. And then I provide more of the qualitative analysis of their responses. Go to the next slide. So again, it's a new emerging area. It's a discovery process. These are not requirements, although they might be in the future. It's not an audit. Their questions are not requirements. So sometimes when I meet with vendors, they have their proposal team there and they think, oh, we're gonna have to start doing X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, we just want to get a sense of where you're at. And then the governing body, in this instance, you as the board, will determine what your priorities are. Go to the next slide. So here's some results. So here is a summary of the quantitative results. And again, not a scorecard. This is how they answered the questions, all 6 vendors. So this shows you the number of questions, how many yeses, how many nos, partial, and development, and other. I would say this is moderately interesting. It doesn't tell you how well they're doing something, for example. It just says this is how the benefit vendor responded to the questions. So interesting, but not the whole picture, I don't think. And I know that boards love to have numbers, and my actuarial colleagues love to have numbers. So I have numbers here, but again, not a scorecard. This is how they responded to questions. Go to the next slide. So here are some benefit vendor DEI strengths, diversity, equity, inclusion strengths. So most of the vendors demonstrated very strong organizational commitment. A lot of organizations have recently implemented initiatives to support health equity, things like social determinants of health and referrals to community-based organizations to meet social needs. Most have accommodations for people with vision loss, hearing loss, and limited English proficiency. The benefit vendors with provider networks have initiated efforts to have provider diversity. This has been something that we've been working on for a while with PEB, and all 3 of the medical carriers, Providence, Moda, and Kaiser, are all working on provider diversity, as well as other organizations that have provider networks. Most have some diversity, equity, and inclusion learning and development for their staff, which is a good sign, because in order to have a positive member experience, you want to make sure that the staff that are interacting with your members have trained on different topics. And then the next few are, some have specialized services for the state's prioritized populations. I think there may have not been as much awareness of the prioritized populations with the benefit vendors, but I think that's part of the process of just exposing everyone to this information. Some vendors have established reading grade levels for benefit communications, and the benefit vendors either have partial or full alignment with what are called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are internationally recognized guidelines to make websites and apps accessible for people with vision loss and hearing loss and other forms of disabilities. So those are some strengths. We also identified some opportunities. Go to the next slide. We're suggesting that the benefit vendors continue on their journey around provider diversity, going beyond race or ethnicity and gender potentially, and go into, on a voluntary self-identified basis, identifying providers from other demographics such as LGBTQ or veterans. I think also I would suggest that your medical carriers report on their health equity initiatives. All the medical carriers are indicating that they're doing health equity initiatives. And so I would say then let's hear updates in your regular meetings with them to find out what they're doing, what progress is being made. I think also, particularly in light of the pandemic, behavioral health issues have escalated greatly. And so suggest that your benefit vendors develop and implement systematic behavioral health screenings and referrals, and then have reports on those. The same for social determinants of health. All three of your medical carriers are have initiated social determinants of health initiatives. Your disability carrier is going to be initiating social determinants of health initiative in 2022. And so then I would just say, get reports on that, because social determinants of health disproportionately impact prioritized populations. And also initiatives around health literacy and literacy would also be good to get updates on that, as well as shared decision-making and treatment decision support. And so I think that particularly your medical carriers have a lot of this in the works. And so what I would say is have them update you as a board on a lot of these initiatives that they're working on, so that you have some assurance that you're making progress on these different initiatives that will help support the health equity initiative, assuming the board, of course, is committed to health equity, which I assume you are. We also, if you go to the next slide, have some considerations for both OEB and PEB. So again, it's at the flip side of receive reports on initiatives around health equity, social determinants of health, behavioral health, consider requiring at least partial alignment with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You might want to identify prevalent languages other than English and Spanish for your workforce, and then indicate to your vendors, your benefit carriers, that you would like printed materials in these other languages. If you have information on demographics of your population, sending that information to your vendors so that they can do the analysis to identify health disparities and health inequities would be a recommendation. And then the last one there is, if you've not done so already, identifying a health literacy standard. So like 8th grade reading level. Some plan sponsors pick 6th grade, which is fine. I think 12th grade is too much, in my opinion. 8th grade or 6th grade is a happy medium. And I think your benefit vendors would be happy to adhere to that, whatever standard you set. So those are some recommendations for you to consider, and it's the same ones for PEB as well. And if there's any possibility in alignment, particularly on like language or requiring like at least partial alignment with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, it would be great if both boards could be together on that, if at all possible. Was there a question? Yeah. No. Okay. Next slide. So the next steps, we are sharing results with the Health Equity Work Group. We've identified 2 vendors that we're working more intensely with to get updates on their questionnaire because we saw significant opportunities. We are going to be meeting with all of 6 benefit vendors. So ultimately, we'll be meeting with all 6 vendors. We were focusing on these 2 to begin with. So hopefully in the next month or 2, we'll meet with the medical carriers and others. We are continuing to meet with we may be continuing to meet with other benefit vendors to discuss their DI initiatives. And we'll continue to update the boards as we get more information on the progress that your benefit vendors are making around health equity. So I think that's it for the DI benefit vendor assessment. And I'm running over time, Ali, so I don't know if you want me to continue, but I have yeah, go ahead, Ali.
No, I just wanted to thank our carriers. You know, I think it was, like you said, a lot of work, and yes. I think we learned a lot, and I think they've learned a lot as well. And, you know, as we continue and really just start this journey together, what we'd like to do is plan a retreat in the fall with the board and really focus on advancing health equity within our benefits and program, and just make sure that we're performing, you know, at an optimal level. And I look forward to future work here. Thank you.
I've run out of time. What I could suggest is I could come back next month and do the next part of the presentation. Would that? I just don't want to hog the whole time here.
That's
so, Ali, do we actually have a May meeting for sure?
Oh,
we do. We just don't have the 2nd April one. so we do have a May meeting. Mm-hmm.
That would be fine. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, and sorry for, I felt like I had to do some background work, and the rest of it should go more quickly.
Thank you, Michael, and I look forward to hearing more and working with you more.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. All right. We are at other business and public comments. So, Rose, do we have any public comments other than the one that was posted at the bottom of our packet?
No, that's the only one you have.
And Ali, do I need to do anything with regards to the posted public comment? Anything additional?
Nope, you've done everything. Thanks to the board for a lot of great work today. Thank you.
Okay, well, I also thank the board for making many motions and votes. And I'm really gratified that we could reach very good results in a short amount of time. It's not always that way every year, so enjoy this one. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to call this meeting to a close, and we do have a May meeting scheduled. And so I will see all of you then, and then maybe next year we can do this in person. So you never know. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Bye-bye.